Hey man.
How you doing, butter?
Yeah, I'm good. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Um, Absolutely frothing to sink our teeth into the immune system and to have a little go at autoimmunity. I think this one's been, gosh, 6 years in the making of
hmm
conversation back and forth.
Sure has. Yeah.
Look, some people might have heard it like listening to our Reishi conversation or even our gut series in regards to your history. But now that we're talking about autoimmunity in this conversation, do you want to give everyone a kind of just again, that little backstory of your experience personally?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you the short version because it could probably be a podcast in itself.
Mm.
But I think it was around the age of 17, ran into a really hectic and nasty case of Epstein-Barr virus. And it was about 2 years after that I was diagnosed eventually with celiac disease. And essentially went on the gluten-free diet and took the allopathic advice and saw, a myriad of doctors and specialists. And just over the course of, I'd say, probably the next 8 or 9 years, never really got my health back and started expressing, I guess you could say, autoimmune symptoms popping up in different body areas to the point to where I knew that there was additional processes going on and that I wasn't just achieving complete resolution of health simply by just adopting a gluten-free lifestyle. And the more I read about the upstream drivers of autoimmunity and things like that, and then started, looking at my bloods in, more detail and understanding things like autoantibodies and how the immune system worked and how the gut influences the immune system. I, I was able to then make links between, the fact that my microbiota had been completely blasted apart in my earlier years through
Yeah.
having Epstein-Barr virus and stealth infections and strep throat and H. pylori and the whole kit and caboodle. And so,
Did you go down with doctors? Did you do like the traditional treatment, like where you went, like was it corticosteroids and
intravenous antibiotics, corticosteroids, injected, and
immunosuppressants?
immunosuppressants. Correct. Yep. Yep. So,
Delicious.
yeah, nice little cocktail there.
Well, let's just quickly touch on that because we're like,
Mm,
no doubt we're going to go down a big immune rabbit hole here. And so we might as well start, I want to start covering a couple of things. We're going to go a little bit and hear your just, general description of what autoimmunity is, because I think we've got a lot of people who are possibly dealing with it, a lot of people who possibly aren't, and are just like loving getting themselves tuned up about what's going on out there in the world. And when you bloody look at autoimmunity, I think that there was research done, I think it was last year or the year before,
mm,
where there were 25 million people had been, through epidemiological studies, had been shown to have autoimmune issues. But that was only studying 24 autoimmune conditions, so only the trendy ones that they had
yeah.
enough evidence. So basically, when you look at it, it's about 50 million people in America. I don't know what it is in Oz, but 50, and I think that's probably I think it's better to go by American statistics because it just sounds more shocking. but but
Well, we know there's going to be a lead on a spillover after it happens in the States to other Western countries, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I think we're looking at like 50 million in the US, and
Mm,
then because there's like autoimmunity. Gosh, this is the funny thing when you go and you look at all the different types of autoimmunity, and you look at Addison's and endometriosis, and you look at celiac and rheumatoid arthritis. They're all little labels and diseases, and it's very much, we've talked about the shiny things. I think I've talked about my friend Jagamara taking me outside to go, the difference between you white fellas and the difference between us black fellas. When you look up at the stars at night, in the sky at night, you look at the shiny things. We look at the space in between the stars. And that has a lot to do with the way the West looks at a disease, and the way someone who, whether you're looking from a treatment perspective, we can say like an Eastern perspective, right? Where you
yeah.
look at the TCM way that they approach it, there's not even an acknowledgement of the infection or the pathogen or the immune system. There's no there's no acknowledgement of the immune system at all. There's no the immune system's aggravated or
Yeah. Yeah.
overactive or anything like that. It's all space between the stars. And so when you can get really wrapped up in I'm celiac, it's like you look at Hashimoto's and you go gosh, look at all these diseases. You look at the list. If you go to Wikipedia and look at the list of autoimmune diseases that there are, far out. It is incredible. And once you get pigeonholed and you're in the pit, it's really hard to get back up. It's like Vaseline up the sides of those walls. And so one of the things I want to bring forth in this conversation is holding those two ideas at the same time, that yes, there are all these, you know, there's this huge list of basic symptoms and what's going on in different pathways in the body and what aspects of the body are deteriorating thanks to the autoimmunity. But then we can go back and look at the space in between the stars. The TCM does this magically, and they're just looking at, like, we've got a deficiency, we've got a core yin deficiency, we have phlegm, there's a pattern, and we're going to treat the pattern. And the worst that can happen is you can get attached mentally to the label of, you know, oh, I've got a yin jing deficiency. Or, something like to that effect. And I want to go a little bit into the classification that TCM can give, like, you know, oh, I've got a damp constitution. It's much easier to pull yourself out of a damp I've got damp and phlegm and treat that pattern. But now we're looking down the barrel, and true TCM or Taoist style, because I'm not a TCM practitioner, I much prefer going a little bit further back before the temples were built to make, you know, because the emperors were catching on to Taoism and thinking, oh gosh, I'll jump onto this bloody bandwagon. Let's mobilize 300,000 people and go build a temple on Wudang Mountain. Gosh, I'm going to make this thing trend. But you go back, and it's the whole nature of it is like heaven and earth, yin and yang. And summer and winter. And you hold both these extreme ideas in your mind at the same time to bring forth true intelligence and evolution. And I'm liking that at the moment with, what we can look at it with, like, an allopathic approach is the extreme, and a TCM approach is probably the other extreme. And what about the space between that as a functional practitioner yourself? You know, you're not dishing out these immune suppressant drugs, but a lot of your colleagues are still sending out a lot of immune suppressant herbs as primary treatment. It might not be steroids, but you go and you look at those herbs that are having similar actions, because the decree is coming from that modern medicine allopathic world in terms of how this is treated. And that the stigma around autoimmunity is that the immune system's attacking itself. We don't know why. The immune system, it's just, sorry, your immune system's confused. There's not much we can do except suppress it. And then and try and drive some hormones that your body's not actually able to do. So in saying that, where were you again?
I'd like to think I'm somewhere in the middle. And I think, like, to your point, it's a really exciting time that we can marry, especially as naturopaths and functional doctors, that we can marry ancient wisdom with the modern science, because I think there is a lot of practitioners that can see an autoimmune condition and sort of not know where to start. And as you say, use the herbal equivalent of immunosuppressants, or not that I'd still class herbs in that category as toxic and nasty as an immune suppressant per se, but I think sometimes the knee-jerk reaction is to just shut the inflammation down first, particularly when practitioners don't know where the upstream drivers might be coming from, which we'll get into later on. But I think ultimately you really do have to look at, to get resolution of autoimmunity, or at least to ameliorate the symptoms and the suffering and bring back balance and tolerance to the immune system, it has to be a multi-pronged approach. You cannot just simply shut the immune system down, ameliorate the symptoms, and just pretend that it's all not still bubbling underneath, because it does pop out, in a different area if it's suppressed for long enough. And if the drivers are still there, it will then again pop out in another area. I've seen patients that developed autoimmunity in their 20s. By their late 30s, they've been on immune suppressants and DMARD drugs and whatnot. It'll pop out, they might have celiac, and then it might turn into Hashimoto's thyroiditis 10 years later. And then, type 1 diabetes if they're really unlucky. So it really is a modern epidemic. And onto what you were saying earlier in the conversation, I think it's quadrupled in the last 50 years, quadrupled the rates of autoimmunity. And now it's like the second most prevalent class of chronic illness. So it's hectic times indeed.
So, like, have you got a basic description of how you see like autoimmunity and what it is? Like outside, like traditionally, we look at it like the immune system's attacking tissue of the body or attacking itself. Where are you at in evolving that description?
Look, I really do lend myself to the molecular mimicry hypothesis, which essentially is the idea that certain dietary proteins or different infections, viruses, bacteria, etc., share a similar DNA kind of protein molecular pattern with different tissues around our body, to the point to where the immune system, if it is being dysregulated for long enough, cannot tell the difference between what is the actual bug or the dietary protein and what's the tissue. So, for example, we know that a type of bacteria called I think it's called, here we go. I wrote it down so I wouldn't pronounce it incorrectly. Yersinia enterocolytica. There you go. So that particular bug shares its sort of DNA structure with the TSH receptor on the thyroid. And so when Hashimoto's pops up in someone comes in with thyroiditis, and we find out that they got Hashimoto's, so hypothyroidism from the fact that the immune system is progressively destroying the thyroid. One of the things us integrative practice want to look at first is we want to do a comprehensive digestive stool analysis and see if that particular class of bug does pop up, because we know there is such a strong link between the molecules within that class of bacteria that really resemble, the TSH receptor. And that's where the immune system gets to the point, like I say, where it can't distinguish between both and starts attacking the thyroid. And you see that again with Proteus bacteria and rheumatoid arthritis. So the synovial fluid that coats the joints looks very, very similar to that type of Proteus bacteria. And that's where the molecular mimicry comes into it. And you see this with dietary proteins too. Casein is a classic one. The casein protein looking like the small intestine, or arguably gluten, looking like the small intestine. And so we're starting to really match the amount of bacteria and viruses and that sort of thing with different tissues around the body, which is good because it gives us, as I say, us functional practitioners more sort of weaponry to go, okay, we've got all these symptoms. We know that they've got this condition. How can we get at the upstream drivers? And then it's a process of working through, okay, yes, you might have a certain genetic predisposition. One of the things we need to do is reduce antigenic exposure through the gut. So if the gut wall is leaky, the immune system progressively is getting exposed to these massive molecules from dietary proteins, from virus, from bacteria, and that's where the dysregulation starts to occur at that gut wall. In addition to that, if you've got a stealth pathogen load, as I say, genetic predisposition, and then heavy metals or a high toxic load, that's the classic recipe for the autoimmune disease to really kick in.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because we constitutionally, and I think you're going to go into genetics a little bit, right? Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
I mean, because there's always that side of things, but epigenetics that comes up more and more. I don't think we need to just bang on about the fact that, it's just genetic and bad luck. That's an absolute story. But there's a part of it, I think, that needs to be acknowledged. And I think the alternative scene's starting to kind of acknowledge the fact that it's not just all rainbows and fairies anymore, that you can't just go just put yourself in the environment and you'll express. No, there's genetic things there. There's ancestral things there. And there's environmental toxicity that's built into your constitution that's going to take a long time to get out in order to actually relieve yourself from this spiral of autoimmunity. Because some people listen to this. I know I've spoken to, and I'm sure you as well, how many people you've spoken to that have just been battling autoimmunity for so long, and to have someone just go, listen, all you need to do is change the environment of your body and your genes express, really lacks empathy. Yeah. But what I feel is the degree of empathy needs to come up a few notches. But at the same time, what that person needs, and what I've needed at times, in different situations, is just more encouragement that sorry, don't take your foot off the gas. Yes, this is going to take a lot of energy, and almost, isn't it worth not deteriorating? if you keep your foot on the gas right now with all these practices and all the treatment, and you find ways to make it work financially for you, and you make sure that that mentally you're really fortifying yourself and taking breaks for yourself, at least you're not falling back. And now at that point, you hold your ground like, just like a stubborn ox, which is very character building. And then possibly you get points where space will be created, and then you can push forward again and actually, in some instances, completely rid yourself of infection or genetic expression. For some people, it's going to be easy. You've had massive success, especially been young when you got onto it. You were able to actually alleviate yourself of the symptoms to the point where you are like, wouldn't be classified as having an autoimmune issue anymore. Oh my gosh, it's a miracle. And it happens all the bloody time.
It does. Yeah.
And for some people, it doesn't. And that's fun as well. Like, it's like in that instance, like, like when my mum first had her brain injury, right? It was like, all right, come on, we're going for like back to who she was. And then after a few years, you realize, oh, that's not going to happen, because it's it's an extenuating circumstance, and you have to acknowledge the actual realities of what you're dealing with. And some people are going to have a gnarly infection, a gnarly autoimmunity where that needs to be acknowledged. But
yes.
Like here in this conversation, what's not present in the allopathic medicine world, but generally it's like, look, just like sit back and let the institution cuddle you to your grave, basically, as you deteriorate, and we'll give you some drugs.
Yeah.
No, you like absolutely screw that. No matter if you get a bad ball, you absolutely like sink your teeth into the situation, and to the best of your ability, without keeping yourself in an identity of being sick, which is what I see a lot of the time with like Lyme and MS, where, the biggest problem is, or even, in my mum's instance, you try and like, there comes a point where you go, shit, I'm in this for the long haul. If I keep going the way I was going with my previous expectation that I'm going for absolute back to who I was here, then I'm going to keep on getting disappointed, because I can't hold that. I need to change the framing. I need to get myself out of the fact that I'm treating myself because I'm sick, and you get yourself out of the sickness mentality and out of like, I'm treating myself because there's something wrong. You acknowledge the current situation, wipe the slate clear, and then you keep on charging ahead with healing from what is there, and trying to discover what's possible in that particular autoimmune condition. Or in my mum's instance, she's never becoming back to who she was, but we can keep on driving the quality of life no matter what, and just make sure we don't slip back. Because in 30 years time, you imagine you've got 20% extra health, and there's no deterioration and no tumors coming up because of other circumstances, or, that's what happens with drug-based immune suppressants. In the allopathic world, it's like, right, you know what, there's nothing you can do, just sit on these, mate. And then at that point, you get such an intense inhibiting of lymphocytes and antibodies, like non-selective antibody and other aspects of the immune system, that, in the short term, it makes sense. As you said, even with herbal elements, like if you've got an immune system and symptoms are terrible, basic healing is get those symptoms down so we can get some space, get to the core of what's going on, and quality of life can come forth. But, as was laid down by Shen Nong in the first Materia Medica, there's inferior treatments that you just do short term in order to get some space, then regular treatments that you can do in spurts of a few months, or like, just in lower doses. You can't do it all the time. Then there's superior treatments, the ones that are more constitutional, like hydration, tonic herbs, medicinal mushrooms, sleep. These treatments that you just never take your foot off the gas with those. And it's a juggling act, but hey, it's your life at the same time.
Yep.
The other thing with those, with that drug treatment, as you suppress over long terms, and just like, well, whatever, it's the stars, the shiny things, only the shiny things. They're only looking at inferior treatments, as you know. What do you see then? Increased risk of infection and an increased risk of tumors, deterioration. And so, of course, as you were saying in that instance before, you might have someone with autoimmunity within their gut tissue, and then, we see that progress and become, you happen to get Hashimoto's. Oh, you happen to get type 1 diabetes. Gosh, that's a bad ball. That's bad luck. No, right. There's like space, there's connection there, of course.
Yes.
So
nothing happens for no reason. And that's why I always, try and stress to my patients, it's not just bad luck that person developed that. There's a cause for everything in the body. And look, man, that's the point where I got to too. I got to my mid to late 20s, and the celiac disease was, under control, but I was throwing caution to the wind, and pushing my body, playing around with alcohol and had totally disturbed circadian rhythms. And I got to a point where I was like, I don't want another autoimmune disease to pop up, but I'm starting to get things like sore joints, psoriasis, blah, 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 blah. And, when I backed that up with the blood tests and pushed a bit more and opened the books and learn about things like, autoantibodies and where you can measure how aggressive your antibody response is to certain tissues. So, for example, in connective tissue diseases, we look at anti-nuclear antibodies. In rheumatoid arthritis, we look at rheumatoid factor. In celiac disease, we look at transglutaminase, blah, 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 blah. So once you start identifying those autoantibodies, and then if you suspect that you do have an autoimmune process playing out, have a look at those. Marry up with a practitioner who's used to screening people for those, and do it prophylactically too. That's the other thing. If you've got an autoimmune disease or it's really prevalent in your family, it doesn't hurt to run a series of tests, particularly if you are showing a certain degree of symptoms that are just sort of prescribed, like skin issues or joint issues and things like that. Basically, if you're just not feeling on your game. But the point I was getting to is that I reached a point where I just thought, I can't play around with this anymore. I have to dedicate my life to optimum wellness. And once I get a certain degree of health back, then I can start bringing things back in. I can start maybe pushing my body a little bit more, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I think you hit a wall where, if you do have that certain sort of genetic predisposition, or you do get thrown a certain deck of cards, you really, if you're like me, sort of hit a point where you're just like, I have to bulletproof myself going into the future. I'm not putting up with this crap again. And that's exactly what I did. I went and studied a naturopathic degree and, fell in love with it. And now it's my profession.
Well, I think I met you at your exacerbation. I think that's literally when we were like first chatting. And I think, and I just think I always, in my job, I'm not a practitioner. I'll say it again and again and again. I'm not looking to treat disease or hold anyone's hand. Not that that's not what practitioners necessarily do. Yeah. But I'm not willing to walking someone through a thorough treatment protocol. I like just continuously singing those lifestyle factors and those junctures, which don't get seen when you have to focus on the shiny things, because God knows I'm not doing it. And I like floating between the stars, and almost exclusively. And just coming in here and there and just dancing off a star here and there. But what I see is at those juncture points, if you can just hold on, and this is even if you're in that point where it's not too gnarly, but you're just feeling like this is a bit of inconvenience. Yeah. This is pretty inconvenient. I don't want to, this is like Tani did it. Tani had, autoimmunity of the gut. And was like, well, that's it. You're that's it for the rest of your life. You're going to have an autoimmune issue and you're not going to be able to handle gluten. So she went gluten-free for 7 years and didn't party and was, self-admittedly, basically that person at the, that person at the shindigs that everyone was just like, oh my gosh, why can't I come? Why when you come to this? Why when you come to that? Why can't you eat this? Why? And then now she's like, cured. No autoimmunity, nothing there. Well, how's that possible? Because it's just you just sunk her heels in. And that's what, whether it's a small thing or whether it's a big thing that you're going through, or that if you're maybe helping a friend, or if you're a practitioner that's walking someone through this process, I really recommend for you to really be aware of at that juncture where it gets really, where you get exacerbated, to really just sit down in a yin way. Because at those times, that's where there's a transition happening psychologically from one way of being to another. There's an evolution. And if you can sit yin, very like a rock, supportive, earth element, empathetic, and bringing, that meekness that doesn't have to be right, that can just sit there and trust that person's going to get through it, but be that little voice that says keep going. You can do this. Think about what you've got. Think about if you just dig your heels in now and spend a few years dealing with this, or if you just get through this and then get a smile back on your face and a skip in your step, imagine what that's going to feel like. So,
yeah, it's so true, man. It's awesome hearing that, because I just hearing you say that, I can relate to that really in my journey, where there was, like I say, that time where I reached where I was like, enough's enough. No more partying, no more alcohol, no more burning the candle. I have to dedicate myself to 100% wellness, and I have to stack everything that I know in my power to get on top of this and heal. And when you enter that phase, it's super confronting, man. Like for me personally, it was. And sometimes when you're peeling back the layers of the onion, it's arguably worse than you were before, where you're kind of just existing and floating by, and it bothers you here and there. It's tough, to go through that healing phase. But if you stick it through, and like you said, if you work with the practitioner, you're going to be able to do it a lot quicker than just doing it, on your own accord.
Yeah, man. So let's start diving in a little bit. So I might just cover off very quickly what some of the, what are some of the things that get brought up in TCM. I constantly have a little look at what's going on from an allopathic, description when I'm looking at with a disease in the body, and I like marrying that up with the TCM. So generally, when you're looking at what's going on with an autoimmune reaction, so when you get edema and bleeding and inflammation, hyperplasia and of connective tissues, generally you're going to get association with heat toxicity. So it's going to be and of course, if you look at inflammation of the immune system, you're going to see that in TCM as being heat-based. Blood stasis as well, and also dampness and phlegm. And I liked looking at that dampness and phlegm was always an interesting one, because when I talk about you've got heat within your body, heat toxicity, heating pathogens within you that cause inflammation. When you have blood stasis, your blood's not moving, you're not actually, and at the same time, you're not going to be moving your lymph. And then you're holding on, you got edema and these kinds of things going on. You're going to have a lot of phlegm, you're going to have a lot of water stagnant. And so that's why straight away, I want to look at lifestyle for those. It's immediately, and then what everyone needs to be doing is looking at lifestyle. So I'm not going to go into that just yet, because we're going to cover off a bunch of our favorites. But straight away, when I look at dampness and phlegm and the mobility of moisture in the body, my favorite herb, man, is Poria for that.
Yeah, nice.
That mushroom is why I put it in the Mason's mushrooms, because I wanted, it's up there in the most used herbs in Taoist tonic herbalism. And in basically every longevity blend, you're going to find that Poria. Now, I've got a video of me at the farm. I'll put the link in here of me at the farm, at the Poria farm, describing what this herb actually is. But the movement of dampness and for edema, and if you have phlegm and you need to get the kidneys toned and get the strength of the kidneys so that energetic dampness underneath the heart and that physical dampness that the spleen is having a hard time in displacing as well and moving, to get that really flowing through the body. Poria is just one of my number ones. And funnily enough, Chaga, Reishi, lion's mane, to a certain extent, help in the same way. Now, when you look at then how TCM is going to take most of those issues, now you go and see a TCM practitioner, they will walk you nicely through how we're going to expel that heat toxicity, how are we going to quickly get that blood moving. That's not my world necessarily. I want people to go and find a good TCM practitioner. But when you go to the foundations of what's actually needed to restore the body's constitutional capacity to move through those things, we look at upright chi.
Yeah.
So immediately we're looking at upright chi, which I highly associate with immunity, right?
Big time. Yep.
When you look at the fact that what's the herb in Taoist tonic herbalism that's attributed to upright chi and wheat chi more than any other, it's Astragalus, right? Yes, or Astragalus. Absolutely. And what does it happen to be? Happens to be in the top 3 immunity herbs that you can get your hands on. When you look Chaga, Reishi, Astragalus. I'm saying both pronunciations because I can never remember which is American and which is Australian. I just got them both in my head.
Yeah.
But that upright chi is basically, guys, when you look at it, a really a black and white space, it's that energy that stops your organs from prolapsing, allows movement of fluid and energy and blood through. It's kind of like the space between the stars that you want moving, that upward chi. And that's why I like standing practices, like standing meditation, that really help you to identify places where you're tense within your body and holding on within organ tissue. Because if you tense over long periods of time, and those of you dealing with autoimmunity or any degenerative disease, at some point you're going to have to get in and feel how you are physically holding on to tension within your tissues. That is going to be an immunosuppressant. Absolutely. That's an immune suppressant. or that is going to be something that is exacerbating the symptoms of autoimmunity, that's heightening the response, that's heightening the nervous system. What's going on here? Blah, 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 blah. I'm confused, attack,
Yes.
because you're holding on to that tension. And of course, in something like I'll link to my friend Benny Ferguson's work. He can teach people how to do a standing meditation. And I think I might have a video. And this is what we do when I do retreats, right? When I've got that retreat coming up in end of Feb, we've been talking a little bit about up in the permaculture farm, which is just called Restore, which is basically just all about people getting into their physical tissue and feeling what's there, feeling that tension that's there and releasing that tension and getting some traction about how they can get back onto the horse of understanding how the energy moves to their body, how the emotions move to their body, and how practical the practices are, like herbalism, like Tani taking people through massaging their organs. And whether you can come to this retreat or not, most people can't, because we have a lot of people downloading these and not many people are allowed to come to the retreat. Listen to what I'm talking about. I'm talking about physical practices here that release tension, allow you to feel the emotions. Understanding the emotions that are coming through, because that's going to be linked to the mind, pulling the strings of the tissue surrounding your organs, creating fascial adhesions. And so when I talk about Tani, like at the retreat, of course, one of the things we have to do is get Tani teaching you how to get in and massage your organs.
Yes.
Get in there and possibly massaging your liver and your gut, feeling the adhesions, feeling the pain. And remember, pain hasn't been quantified. Pain hasn't been quantified. And guys, remember, we're going to get into some, don't worry, we're going to get into intestinal permeability. We're going to get into Lyme disease and mold and Epstein-Barr virus. But, you know, Dan and I, when we have conversations about this is the shit we talk about. This is the stuff, the long term that happens in your home, that happens in your lifestyle. Because then when you go and you look at, all right, we got upright chi as like one of the first treatments when you look at, you look at it from a Taoist healing perspective. So what do we need? We need you to stop slumping. And we need you to build an immune system. And so might not be the time to go into medicinal mushrooms right now, but the fact that medicinal mushrooms like reishi mushroom tones jing. Yes, it is a Shen tonic, but far out is incredible chi tonic. Far out lion's mane is an amazing chi tonic, as is Chaga to an extent, as Emporia is 100% a chi tonic. And so what happens when you start moving the chi and you start hitting immune receptors and activating a dormant immune system so it can start moving? You get movement, you get animation. That is chi. When you are animated, you pair that with some walking, some mini trampoline, movement, all of a sudden, and you do that consistently, not the type of movement that absolutely slams your adrenals so you slump again, consistent, gentle movement over a week's, months, and year period. All of a sudden, you're moving your chi. All of a sudden, your upright chi, it's going to be easier for you to stand. Because you're flowing, you're going to get less capacity for the pathogens to come into joint tissue and organ tissue and weigh you down. Add in hydration to that, and you're going to have this beautiful cellular capacity for your electricity to flow. If you're mineralized, whether you need to supplement minerals, whether you need to get onto more seaweeds, whether you need to just be doing more vegetables, and you need to make sure that you're upping the game of your food and your preparatory capacity, which just means you prepare your own food so you know it's minerally dense. I do recommend mineral supplements as well if you're really low vitality, to get that electricity going though. All of a sudden your chi's moving. And all of a sudden, you've got a lifestyle that's going to get some hit hard of what the core thing in Taoist healing, what we do to treat autoimmunity, which is upright chi. Now, that's the first there. Upright chi, all of a sudden, you've got that capacity. You have the ability to eliminate pathogens.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not going to go much too further because I could do a podcast just on that whole motion. But just for those of you, thank you for listening in on this. For those of you that are we're hitting threads, we're talking about it a lot, we're jamming information down your throat, and I hope you're taking notes. But remember, you can write to Dan on Instagram. You can write to me on Instagram, or you can email Dan. You can email myself. You can get this information if you wanted to hear about that association between types of autoimmune diseases and particular pathogens and bacteria or proteins, the mimicry. write to Dan and ask him about it, okay? But I'm gonna keep on going a little bit, if you don't mind, on what the next thing I'd be doing constitutionally. But do you have a resource that you could share on that, or is it better for people just to get in touch with you to get specifics?
It's probably better, yeah, with the latter if they touch base. A lot of the information about mimicry is coming in the way of research, from PubMed and that sort of thing. So I'm more than happy to put some links up, and maybe we can share it in the show notes for folks who want to read more into that. Absolutely.
Okay, well let's do that. Let's really lay out these show notes, and so it's like a nice, really big resource for everyone to go down the rabbit hole. So. Once we're looking at the chi, and from my perspective as well, from a Western perspective, I'm looking at the immune system, and I want to see it rocking. And in autoimmunity, it's the first thing I do. I mean, we'll talk about medicinal mushrooms soon, I hope, because I love talking about them. Just the process I've had to go through with people coming to me and asking if they can take them, because in the book it says it's an immune stimulant, and you're not allowed to take immune stimulants when you have autoimmunity, which is. What we're talking about here is a shattering of the official story around autoimmunity and an evolution of it, and an ability for everyone to come forth into harmony, whether you're leaning east, whether you're leaning west, whether you're full potent allopathic or you're a TCM practitioner, coming further into that heaven and earth integration, so that we can have a more sophisticated understanding of what autoimmunity is, not just, oh, that's the immune system attacking itself. Sorry. Because my description is when the immune system is seemingly attacking itself. And I think caveats like that, so the mind can't attach to anything, is absolutely necessary. But
yeah,
the process I've had to go through with medicinal mushrooms and people coming up and asking me about it, has been wild. And as you know, we've talked about arriving at this place where I'm just I'm gun ho with it now. The next treatment, when you look at what's actually going on at the heart of the constitution when the pattern of autoimmunity emerges, which I was talking about before, and those symptoms or those TCM patterns, is a yin deficiency, and particularly a yin deficiency of the kidneys and the liver. And they're always associated. When you look at the primary yin kidney herb in Taoist herbalism, Hishiwu is a kidney liver yin tonic, right? As long as it's been prepared and sourced correctly, and ideally sourced D-Dao. So that's where I start. It's it depends on the constitution. This isn't a one size fits all. I actually like the use of Jing, the blend, because it's balanced. It's not inherently yin or yang, and it's got the dendrobium in there at the end, sealing it all in. So yin basically, guys, is the form of your body, the form of your organs. Yang is the function of your body, the function of your organs. And so basically with autoimmunity, that yin deficiency is a deficiency of the capacity for your body to keep on evolving its form and holding the form, so that your nervous system and your hormones have a baseline, have roots in the soil of your body. Remember, the roots being coming from the kidneys and the Jing into the soil, generally associated with the gut. That's why they're so tightly associated within the foundations of health. But if you have that yin deficiency, there's no get up and go and place for you to dictate how the function of your body goes. And so you see what giving rise to a confused immune system, especially when you look at the role of the liver. Now, we can go into, I wouldn't mind hearing your 2 cents on what you see the role of the liver being, but if we go an energetic role, it's the maestro or the general of the body. It's there conducting the whole show. Forget about the heart. The heart's the emperor sitting in there having a ball. The general, the composer is there. Going, all right, where we're sending this here, sending this there. Now you need the infrastructure to do that. You need somewhere to live. The yin needs somewhere to live. And generally what we find is the house becomes a shambles within the kidneys and the liver. And so you can't actually continue to hold your energy and hold that baseline for function. And so we look at herbs like Jing herbs, like Hishiwu, right? And I'm either going to go solely down that route if I see a pattern of, yes, it's yin that you're deficient in, or if it looks more just generally, you've got a kidney deficiency, and you need baseline energy, because in any treatment protocol, I think, if you're stressed and exhausted and your kidneys don't have the punch, you're not going to heal, because that's where the regeneration comes from. And so I always will focus, but that's how it's been done for, thousands of years. We focus there, especially we see the pattern of yin deficiency coming in through the kidneys. And then I focus on the yin of the liver. And so I'm going to be focusing on a herb like Schizandra berry in order to, and again, it's like, oh my gosh, can you do that? Can you just take that? Did he just say that? It's like, oh my gosh, it's somewhat of an immune stimulant sometimes. It's like, of course. Yeah, because it helps function and it helps pour essence and yin essence into the liver so that the body can function. And what I will put in as a, actually, let's go down that yin route, like a yin building lifestyle is then what I look at with autoimmunity. Because if you're looking at balancing yin and yang, you've got so many yang presenting symptoms, right? When it comes in, when you're looking at the autoimmunity, you're like, like eruptions, inflammation, infection, hot. And so what do you need to do? I mean, not necessarily cooling, because I don't want to give the impression that I just want you to go and drink cooling celery juice all day long, because that could potentially be terrible for your gut, but potentially great if done in balance. But I'm talking about a yin building lifestyle. And so at that point, we really need to focus on your transitions into sleep. And I do want to get back to your liver interpretation. So, but I want to hit this, what are you doing? How are you transitioning into sleep? How are you transitioning out of sleep? I don't want to focus on the sleep inherently, because I want that to be optimized. But what I need everyone to be focusing on is how do you get yourself in a space where that's it? You know that you need to go to sleep every day, and you do that consistently and build up that yin. How much time are you spending in nature? I really want you to be transition yourself out of the mental hive of the West and into a space where you feel comfortable, and not just berating yourself that you're doing this, but get out there barefoot in nature, in the water, into the hills. That's a yin building lifestyle, because at that point you're moving into a parasympathetic state. And what people think parasympathetic is exhausted. Oh my gosh, why am I still tired? And this is what happens on the retreats. I've talked about this how often. We get 3 days in, they're like, I'm not doing anything. I'm so tired. It's like, yeah, that's how you feel. That's how you feel. You can't avoid it anymore. Look at it. And yeah, this is a bit harsh, but you're going to have to feel it, and you're going to have to cop it. Yes. But that's how you feel.
And get honest with yourself. That's right.
Get honest with yourself. So that's why yin building lifestyle is not sexy, but hydration, sleep, time in nature, laughter, feeling the difference between, you might feel exhausted, build back that yin, and that jing, so that you don't feel exhausted, and then once you're feeling in a place where you're not living in, consistent pain, and you're not, you're not feeling like you're exhausted is the word. Everyone knows what that feels like. Then don't mistake tiredness for the fact that you're parasympathetic, and make sure you allocate times for you to sit there and lounge and be you. And so that's basically, that's my real overarching approach in that sense. And then obviously when you're looking at yin, you want to be building up the body. So I look at obviously I'm looking at a nourishing diet. I'm not jumping into any fasts necessarily at the building stage. Once the yin's built up, then I'm happy to start looking at some fasting protocols or some more extreme detoxification.
Yeah. And then to that point, it's like with, certainly the way I do it is to never go in guns blazing when an autoimmune case comes in with detox as the first and primary. It's just not the way you do it. Like you said, we really want to support that constitution. And something you touched on earlier with yin deficiency, I think a good sort of a good way to understand that is everyone's heard of adrenal fatigue, right? Everyone. I'm sure we're preaching to the choir here, but what we typically see is the modern equivalent of that real yin deficiency is when the adrenal glands basically fall short on producing adequate amounts of cortisol and DHEA. What we hear a lot about cortisol, and cortisol kind of gets a bad name, and you can understand because it's associated with being the stress hormone. But what it is it's the hormone that comes in after the stress to kind of, it's an anti-inflammatory hormone essentially, so it's checking inflammation. What we see in autoimmunity is that a prolonged pro-inflammatory response over such a long time has essentially exhausted the body's ability to produce adequate amounts of cortisol to check that inflammation, to the point to where it becomes yin deficient, you know? And so what I also want to add in there is that cortisol, we know this from really recent research, it's called the cortisol awakening response, and it's something that happens in the morning. And our own immune system, via using cortisol, has a unique ability to be able to check rogue cells that do have a potential to become autoimmune, which is awesome, you know, and you really want to support that process. It happens, you know, in the thymus gland. However, if someone is burnt out, adrenally exhausted, smashing coffees, you know, totally flogging themselves, and, you know, in that yang state, in that fight or flight state, we know that their production of cortisol is going to be pretty flatlined. And so that is going to predispose us to more inflammatory autoimmune type complexes circulating in the bloodstream. So in a nutshell, if we see that happen for a prolonged period of time, I think that along with the intestinal permeability, which we'll get to, those two I feel are really, you know, strong sort of initiators upstream of an autoimmune process to play out.
Oh man, so good. And then like you look at the fact that you're in a yang lifestyle. Coffee is super yang. And this is why people are like, oh gosh, can I put my hishu in my coffee? I'm like, oh my God, if you're doing a coffee, please
add it.
Please, because you're having an elixir, please balance it out. Please know that you're the alchemist here. I just wanted to hear your take on liver function as well, and just where this impacts in a foundational level.
When I think of the liver, that's the analogy I use is really simple. So I won't go into it in a really elaborate way, but I often just think of it as if the liver can't keep up with the backlog, if it can't eject that backlog to keep up with the front end, that's essentially when you run into trouble. And that's what we see happen when someone is in that fight or flight state. All those processes, when someone's nervous system is hyper excited and stressed out, all those parasympathetic processes like detoxification from the liver, hormonal secretion, anti-inflammatory molecules being produced from the thymus and the adrenals, immune balance, recovery, collagen and structural integrity, and all those sort of processes get put on hold when we're in that fight or flight state. That's why I think that really needs to be brought to the forefront alongside the leaky gut wall concept, which is super, super important. But I know you've mentioned it before, being like the Jing is like the pilot light, you know, for those upstream processes. And I think
pilot light for those of you that didn't hear our gut podcast, the pilot light for digestion is that Jing kidney function.
Right. Yeah. I mean, exactly. We know that if the digestion's off, then, you know, we're in trouble essentially. So yeah, to the liver, basically enhancing the body's ability to be able to roll out those phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3 processes to convert, you know, toxins and metabolites into their forms that can be excreted by the kidney and the bowel. And so if you have a sluggish liver, even if it's half good and it's getting you halfway there, but then the bowels and the kidneys are sluggish, then you're going to run into problems, because then we're going to get enterohepatic recirculation of all those metabolites. So I know I'm talking in more of a westernized sense, but I think it kind of helps translate your TCM, you know, perspective onto it, because we know that there's just such good evidence that those theories check out. The old TCM understanding of everything just has such a spot on correlation, and it's awesome.
It's just talking about the exact same thing. It's just always the craziest reality. And if everyone just got their head out of their ass and just realized that different perspectives are beautiful and create more of a dynamic dance of healing and possibilities for healing, because everyone's minds and emotions want to heal in different ways. And if there's more people realizing like, oh man, I'm understood on all these levels. I'm understood by the Western world. I'm understood by Eastern and, you know, like Indigenous Australian, you know, like spiritual association. Man, I'm so understood right here. You feel welcome. Oh my gosh, all of a sudden I'm getting parasympathetic here because I'm understood. Yes.
That's where the magic happens. That's where we see the most potential for healing. I think if people stay stuck in one of those systems and just try and do just try and saturate everything from that system and stay locked into it, that's when you run into trouble. But if you can have your foot in all those pies and understand, the Eastern, the Western, use the latest research, marry it up with the ancient wisdom, that's when you're going to give yourself the most bang for your buck.
So let's go to intestinal permeability. You reckon it's like initiating, eh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So just to remind everyone, we are talking about autoimmunity. We haven't said that for a while, but it was exactly what we've been talking about the entire time. It's funny how we seem to have the same conversation, different tones, very different tones, but quite often it's interesting because there's a pigeonholing between immune deficiency and cancer and tumors, and then a pigeonholing of autoimmunity. You think it's a very different thing in treatment sense. No, the superior treatment protocols are going to remain quite similar, although you're going to need to stay on your toes to feel what different psycho, spiritual, and emotional and physical, chemical, ancestral, genetic elements are going to be coming up for you individually. Then don't get attached to them because it's not your bloody identity, and then keep on moving forward. And just remember that you want to be a rad, rockin', elder that doesn't have an intense amount of symptoms. And so you can get over your identity with autoimmunity right now. I can tell everyone that much. I'll throw my absolute support behind that before anything else. Just remember, this is a reality of what's going on in your body right now. But in terms of it becoming identity, you'd be surprised how sneakily that will really creep up on you and embed itself in your mental and emotional pathways.
Yep.
So
particularly if you read a lot of Western literature and you've been down that route where you're told, we don't know what causes autoimmune disease. Which really, really frustrates me. I'm not disclaimer, I'm not an immunologist, and I'm not here to say we've found the cause to every autoimmune disease, but there's enough data now to really correlate, I'll use that word, correlate, upstream causes, like we just said, genetic predisposition, enhanced intestinal permeability, diet, stress, molecular mimicry, heavy metals.
I think what I mentioned official stories before, and modern medicine always needs an official story. And what you were just talking about then is we find a correlation, and then we always have to say correlation doesn't mean causation. But who wants a causation? What, do you want a straw man? Do you want something to point the finger at? Or do you want a pattern? Do you want a correlation? Do you want a way out? Do you want a rhythm that's going to lead you forward rather than looking back and going, what was the cause? Well, if they find the cause, then they can take out the cause, and then I won't have the autoimmune disease anymore. It doesn't work like that.
No, it's not as black and white. That's right.
So, I'll throw that. We don't want a cause. We want correlations. We want patterns that we can see again and again and again and again and again, because then you can get into that pattern and into that rhythm, and you can dance your way out of it or walk your way out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on. That might be a good segue into the TH1, TH2, TH17 dilemma, which I'm sure you've heard lots of over the years from people that are sort of caught in the blogosphere, so to speak, and pigeonhole their autoimmunity to certain immune cells, which these things are. When we say TH1 or TH2, we're talking about T helper cells, and so probably good to just classify that. It was sort of once thought that the immune system was just as simple as this seesaw, and on either end you had TH1 helper cells and TH2 helper cells. And if one side of the seesaw was up, i.e. TH1, usually the other side was depressed and underactive, and vice versa. And a lot of information started coming out online saying that autoimmune conditions are strictly TH1 dominant, and basically you need to balance out that seesaw of your immune system and drop your TH1 cells and use herbs that support the other pathway, and vice versa. If you're TH2 cells or you have a condition that's TH2 dominant, you have to support the TH1 side. But I think it's good to sort of just to let the listeners in that there's so much more information that's come out since then, and just to highlight the fact that we can't pigeonhole herbs strictly to being classified just strictly as TH1 or TH2 or TH17, for example. I don't know, do you want to speak more to that with the experience you've had over the years with folks coming up?
Yeah, I would. And I think I'd also like to hear a little bit more. I'd like to point out that we do see threads of herbs, like, and we classified them before. There's herbs that are, in the Taoist sense, inferior or regular or superior. And there's inferior herbs are going to have more of an audacious way of pushing the body. And you might see more extreme examples of TH1 or TH2 moving up or down through the usage of those herbs if the conditions are right. But I think you're right. It's not like a drug where a drug can specifically almost go in and drive TH1 down.
Yes.
With herbs, you're always going to see that it's a part of the ecology of the body, although you will see that pattern happen more often than not. The thing is with herbs, and what I've seen over the years, whether I'm talking to practitioners or whether I'm just talking to people who are in the autoimmunity blogosphere, is they go, I am TH1 dominance, therefore I can't have any herbs that are immunostimulating. And when you look at immunostimulation and the classification in any materia medica, there's no caveat there. There's no color. There's no bringing color. It's very black and white. I feel like it's getting a little bit better now, and the understanding's starting to move forth. But basically, a herb. What's an aggressive herb that would be driving down TH1?
Driving down TH1, so supporting TH2,
yeah.
You're saying? So it's probably something like Japanese knotweed or green tea or curcumin even.
Okay. And so then you kind of like it, because I think like Japanese green, like the green tea, it's still like, they're still probably sitting in that regular, not like, not even in that, like, and so you're going to be see like there's a possibility for more long-term usage. But then like herb like reishi mushroom, it's been one, and when I first started SuperFeast, I was very humble about my knowledge at the time. And so I had people coming up and asking whether they could take reishi mushroom with autoimmunity. And based on what I could, like, based on the trust that I had of the literature that I've read, and also the trust that I had in the herb that I had with my own experience, internally I was comfortable with saying yes, despite the fact that in every book it says it's an immunostimulant. And by that, from the way that practitioners are really taught these days, if you look at your materia medica and you look at the classification of the herb, and if it says it's immune stimulating and there's an autoimmune issue where TH1 is up, it's irresponsible to give an immunostimulant. Fair enough.
Right.
But over the years, what I did in those early days, especially in the markets, is I just like held my tongue, because I'm just like, I didn't feel like I was in a position where I wanted to just be driving forth with something I didn't know intrinsically, even though anecdotally I knew it back to forth, and I'd done enough research also to see that in fact that wasn't correct, that herbs like chaga and reishi and lion's mane that were seen as stimulating the immune system were actually fine and actually generally helped. And so over the years, I'd talked, especially with friends or with people who I knew they were working with a practitioner that was rad, I'd say, okay, yeah, I actually find that these herbs aren't immune stimulating. They are actually regulating of the immune system. And this is where I want to talk to you about. And so that's the example. And I'm sorry, like, I'm just wanted to talk about this because I just wanted to explain my process, if you don't mind. I was talking to you about it before we came in. Like, and over the years at the markets, I just walked beside enough people with autoimmunity, and I was very gentle with saying, yes, I want to see you introducing, occasionally Astragalus as a herb, which I wouldn't mind talking to you at the end of this episode about, because we've had many discussions about whether Astragalus is appropriate or not when there is infection. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people going, yeah, and I'm like, you know what? Your autoimmunity, the one thing I do know is that there's a bit of a flabby immune system. You've lost intelligence within your immune system. There is something going, and for you to only be suppressing or doing nothing, I know that there's going to be infection that's going to be taking advantage of that situation. Because if there's inflammation and an immune system that doesn't know what it's doing, bacteria and viral and fungal load are designed to go in and exploit that situation and start composting tissue, which is a beautiful process of the earth. And so even when I wasn't really like at the level of information that I knew now, I knew that they were working, right? And so I'd work with practitioners. Sure enough, you'd get good results. Over the years, practitioners start coming to me. I've actually never had any practitioner have a go at me. It was like back in the days when I had iodine on the side, there'd be practitioners every now and then having a go at you for like offering iodine and allowing people to take health into their own hands. But with mushrooms, it's never been the case. Even with practitioners, and I've jumped on the phone with many of them over the years, they're like, hey, I just wanted to talk to you. You know, you gave my client your number to talk about like the mushrooms and herbs and things that you're giving them. And they've always had wonderful things to say, like, you know what? Yeah, it's actually working. You've talked about using it in clinically before. The worst that you've had happen is nothing. But what happened was there was enough trust in medicinal mushrooms at some point that I'd have people calling SuperFeast going, you know, like a kilo of Mason's mushrooms, please. And I go, okay, cool. That's awesome. You're on the kilos. What's it for? Like, I have an autoimmune condition. I have lupus, or, you know, like I have MS. I said, okay, like how have you been finding it? Like, you know what? I had one jar, and I've been doing enough research, and I've listened to you, and you know, and I'm absolutely going for it. Like, it makes sense that my immune system actually needs some feeding through lifestyle, and these medicinal mushrooms are really, really assisting me. I talk to them, of course, every single time. Start low and be very gentle with yourself. And you either are working with a practitioner, or your full-time job is working on your health and actually being able to stay tuned into what's going on in your body. You're one or the other, because with autoimmunity, I personally do not like mucking around. That's why it gets to this point. I was talking to you earlier, because I own a company. I sell medicinal mushrooms. It gets weird to be saying, with autoimmunity, there's never been an issue. Not once with medicinal mushroom.
No, I can concur with that as well.
Which is a hard thing to put out there publicly with something with autoimmunity. And I don't want to, because I don't want to get to the allopathic place where it's just like the new official story is medicinal mushrooms, because what then you're not engaging your intention. I want to talk about the caveat that we're not looking at a cure here. We're not looking at a treatment protocol necessarily, although that we can call that. You're engaging with your immune system. I want you to think about, once you start thinking about the fact that your immune system needs some support, all of a sudden, if you take one action, and whether that action's first taking medicinal mushrooms or something else, like, you know, just going for walks and, you know, allowing your senses to tune into, rather than the white noise of the EMF riddled Western world, tune into the natural rhythm. And start attuning your nervous system and your senses to that, whether that's the driver, whether medicinal mushrooms are the driver, whether hydration's the driver, or healing your gut. You're engaged. You're feeling. You're the practitioner. You're the doctor, right? As well as anyone else you're working with. And that's necessary. So that's why I won't come out and just say, just take mushrooms. They work incredibly. But after all these years, like, it must be thousands now of people. And now, last year, dude, like, I think I called you like halfway through last year, and I was like, dude, there was a turning of the tide. The amount of practitioners that are now using our mushies, and not as much going for like the, oh gosh, I don't know, like, you know, the pharmaceutically kind of herbal brands and things. Like, I like a lot of them, but they're like, no, I want like a powder that they can control.
Yes, a food-based preparation.
Food-based, like, so like they might take them away. Like, cool, the capsules have been really useful up until now in the treatment protocol, but now there's that shift. We don't want them to feel sick anymore. You know, we don't want to feel like you're taking tablets anymore. You want to be putting this into a hot chocolate. You want to put this into your broth. You know, there's sensory activation. The amount of practitioners that came forth last year and started using mushroom powders and allowing the patient, or, you know, the person, to control the dose was insane. Yeah. And the amount of calls we've had going like, the results have been wonderful in autoimmunity has been incredible. And especially when you see that combo of Jing herbs and medicinal mushrooms.
Oh yeah.
So like, that's where, and with TH1, TH2, what I found is a lot of practitioners have gone, wow, it really works with TH1 dominance.
Yeah. Wow. There we go.
And then like saying those exact words. And then when I write, like, I mean, the reason I suggested this podcast is because I wanted to just go through it. I was writing it, but I'm not a naturopath. I don't have the terminology as much as well. And, when I said, you know what, we've actually had a lot of evidence that it helps with TH2 dominance as well.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, it's like, hang on. It doesn't just work in one direction. Nah, man, we're working with superior herbs here. We're working with lifestyle herbs here that actually help the body regulate itself. So I want to hear, man, like dive in, man, like tell us what's going on.
Look, from my perspective, I you know, with my own autoimmunity and going through uni and just really kind of diving deep into the immune system and working out how different herbs played around with different types of cells. There was a time where I was just so sunk into that and wanted to extract as much information as I could, because I knew that that was the way to get on top of immune-related issues, whether it was an autoimmune exacerbation or it was immune deficiency kind of disorder, which is why I love mushrooms so much, because they're applicable to both. But yeah, I, to your point, I back up what I kind of, the work we're doing, I really like to back up with blood tests. And that for me is the ultimate, kind of, you know, icing on the cake. I love it. Don't get me wrong. When people come in and say, I'm using this stuff, my autoimmune symptoms, if anything better, I'm feeling great, blah, blah, blah. I like to then go, okay, sweet. Let's marry that up with the bloods. The bloods don't lie. And when I see those auto antibodies dropping, that for me is just like, yes, that's the proof for me. That's all I need, you know. If I saw auto antibodies rising in response to that, which has never happened, that's when I'd be like, okay, maybe I need to check my understanding of this and change my approach and change what I'm saying. But I haven't seen it. As you said earlier, the worst I saw once was when nothing happened. There was just no shift. But majority of the time, you know, when we see, in conjunction, obviously, with all the other stuff you and I have been talking about, you know, you definitely have to nail the circadian rhythms, the diet, clean up the gut, get the metals out, get the toxicity out. You have to do all those things as well. It's just that when you're using something that you've been previously told is an immune stimulant, to then go in and see that it's just, you know, regulating the immune system and educating it and upgrading it, it's just super rewarding as a practitioner. And there's a lot of time I spent, you know, I guess from a fearful kind of standpoint, going, oh, I'm dancing kind of like a really, you know, I'm playing around with this stuff, and I've got my own autoimmune propensity. So but I'd always do blood work as well and check it out. And then when I saw that it wasn't upsetting my own blood work, and then saw that it was doing, you know, only good things for me and patients, that's when I was like, okay, you know, let's run at this full steam ahead. Yeah,
I remember when you were having that first conversation. And I think with you, I was like, man, go hard.
Yeah.
I was like, I mean, at that point, like I kind of knew. I was like, go hard, start slow, you know, gently increase, stay tuned in. You had the ability to actually do bloods, but go hard, because at some point, dosage is going to matter. And that's the beauty about being able to get something like this. This is why I like getting it out of capsules and getting it into like something you can actually spoon into your lifestyle. Once you know that your body's actually working with it, because, you know, like, mushrooms are a little bit of a different kettle of fish in terms of like they generally do work for everybody. But when you're talking about herbs like Astragalus, you know, maybe that's not one for everybody for every autoimmune condition.
Yep.
How did you go? Because I remember having that conversation with you. I probably talked about that herb more than any other. And I was like, I generally think that one's going to be like a curveball. I'm like, maybe. I don't see, it's not going to harm you. There's a lot of talk about it like sealing in pathogens when you have a cold or flu. But I generally think that's because there's no lifestyle practices that are actually supporting the excretion of that pathogen. And you've got this bottleneck of upright chi. Yeah, we're talking about upright chi, expelling pathogens. That's what happens if you don't have your detox passages, if you're not shitting and pissing and sweating and breathing.
Yeah.
And allowing crap to come out of your skin, then you're gonna get a bottleneck and you're gonna get like some heightened symptoms. But like, where did you fall with it? I can't even like with an actual treatment.
I got to a point with Astragalus. I think it was after I'd done a few papers on it for uni, where I came across some research where it had been used. I think it was in people with systemic lupus, where it was more associated with the kidney, like nephritis.
Yeah.
And that for me, when I saw that research and saw that the Astragalus, I think they were using Astragalus and cordyceps, something similar. That was definitely Astragalus in there. But when I saw the results of that study, I remember that just being the turning point, just going, okay, SLE is one of the most like hectic autoimmune diseases there is, you know, up there with MS and that sort of thing, arguably, of course. If that herb can be used and is having a therapeutic role in that condition, I'm sold. So from there on, there wasn't so much, you know, hesitance towards taking it. But with regard to what you're saying earlier about acute infections, that's something that I'm still a little weary of, to be honest. If I see, you know, there's a lot of heat, there's purulence, there's pus, maybe Astragalus isn't the one you're going to use then. However, once they're over that, that's when you really want to ram as much Astragalus into that person as you can.
I mean, it's a pretty yang herb as well. Like it moves shit very quick. And I think I think kind of what I kind of forget at times is you can't open detox passages that quickly, generally.
Yeah.
And I feel like, from my own personal experience, because I've done so much work in saunas and scrubbing my skin. And guys, if you're following along at home, get this, right? Detox passages, infrared saunas, opening up your skin so you can detox and expel pathogens, deep breathing so you can expel pathogens and toxicity through your lungs, ensuring that you're hydrated and you have a nice amount of minerals in your diet, and many other elements in terms of like toning the kidneys so that you're urinating and really managing the health of the waters within your body. And then a lot of nice, beautiful gut healing protocols and possibly some gut clearing, some clays, lots of fiber to ensure that you are pooing every day and that you are pooing healthily, and you should check it out and make sure that it's a nice color and, you know, work on that. Use that as a barometer for your health. And what I forget at times is like a herb like Astragalus is really going to amp up the immune system on the surface level and try and drive it out and drive out energies. And quite often, if you're stagnant in that capacity to detox, it's just not going to come out. Whereas for me, because my passages are open, it might rock me a little bit, but it's kind of like that. If you're going through hell, keep going. And I like pushing it out like nice and quick, which is, I like that distinction around Astragalus because it took me a long time as well. I think it took a few years, especially talking to you about it, for me to really get comfortable and understand how that worked clinically. Just curious, medicinal mushrooms, what have you used in the clinic for autoimmunity? Have you found any correlations between particular infections and expressions of autoimmunity?
I really like using a combination of reishi and cordyceps for the adrenal aspect, particularly with the cordyceps, obviously. Turkey tail mushroom and the polysaccharide K, that's one of my favorites for getting on top of those stealth infections. But I will say that I do use other herbs in addition to the mushrooms, particularly when I'm trying to shelve out, you know, a stealth EBV or
Epstein-Barr, guys.
Yeah, sorry, Epstein-Barr virus, which is the one that causes glandular fever. So it's usually in conjunction with, you know, there might be, you know, some retinol, some zinc thrown in there, some immune stimulating probiotics, for example, or immune regulating, I should say, in addition to the mushrooms. I find
I think that's a good caveat. I mean, like it's taken me a while to really focus on educating about mushrooms, but I will really add that caveat that it's not the only thing that I'm doing. As you guys have, of course, as you've heard, Christopher Hobbs, when I was at the seminar, I think it was the end of 2017 in Portland, I saw Christopher Hobbs, the guy that wrote the Medicinal Mushrooms book. He's like an absolute rock star herbalist, mycologist, you know him. He reckons cordyceps was his absolute favorite that he's seen clinically over the years for treating autoimmunity. But at the same time, had a lot of good stuff to say about reishi. I've also had a bit of a hard time over the years getting my head around turkey tail being effective because it is the immune stimulant, you know, like because it's such a chi tonic and it's focusing so heavily. I mean, focusing so directly on the thymus as well. It was such a tricky one for me to shed my predisposition to thinking that it was just going to blow out an autoimmune condition. Likewise, never seen it being the case when someone has added in appropriate doses. And remember what we were talking about with Astragalus, it's not just that herb. I mean, with reishi, with turkey tail, with chaga, with poria, you know, so basically a lot of people for me get onto the Mason's mushrooms and then and otherwise they're going to do what we were just talking about. They're either going to do Mason's mushrooms or they're going to go cordyceps, reishi, and maybe turkey tail on their own, or that combo.
Yep.
Or you can do guys, if you're unsure, we're not practitioners, but you can reach out and I can give you my 2 cents. But Oh, but what I was talking about is like the astragalus and the mushrooms. The association there, like astragalus is really surface immunity and real upright. The medicinal mushrooms are a little bit deeper, but they are going to detox you, and they're going to detox, like, you know, because your immune system's going to start getting on top of infections and start ridding them. And so if you go too hard and harder than your detox channels and your lymph is able to actually eliminate them, you might make things worse before it gets better. And you might. And like with anything, you know, it's like with Lyme disease is the classic example. Like you've actually got the ability to make it very bad for yourself if you detox too quickly, right? Like you're just hitting that liver where it hurts and just hitting the tissue where it hurts. So just be aware of that. Slow and steady, guys, and make sure you stay in the dance. So what are we gonna say there?
Yeah, just earlier you touched on cordyceps, and I think it's probably good to throw out there too that one of the immunosuppressant medications commonly used, cyclosporine, indeed comes from a particular constituent from. I don't know if it's cordyceps. I don't think it's the cordyceps we use, but a different type of cordyceps nonetheless, which is very similar. But only they've just isolated that one immunosuppressive quality out of it and concentrated and turned into a pharmaceutical. But what you get obviously with cordyceps is a beautiful array of, you know, hundreds and hundreds of different constituents, which is what makes it so impressive when it's used as a functional food for treating these types of conditions we're talking about, because you're getting adrenal nourishment, you're getting detoxification, you're getting upright chi, and the rest. So yeah, it's just interesting that when we sort of, you know, when we come along and find out that these pharmaceuticals that they have been onto it, and they've been onto it for a long time, and they know about these types of tools because they've taken one constituent from, you know, a particular herb and turned it into something to globally shut the immune system down.
I was thinking about that earlier today, because quite often, and not exclusively, but I can very much feel like appreciation for hardcore modern Western medicine for what it's done here and there. You know, there's like instances like even with antibiotics, and there's many instances with surgery where it's like there's great appreciation.
For
Generally,
sure.
and this might be the alternative scene's official story, but generally you don't see that much of an appreciation or consideration for the medicine within nature, or the medicine within mushrooms, or the medicine within plant material, to the extent where a practitioner that has the sole practitioner that has a patient's life in his or her hands won't acknowledge it, won't have enough appreciation to get themselves on top of being able to actually share that there is actual genuine inquiry that they should be taking in order to get a proper healing process, despite the fact that all the money that pays for their salary, their cars, their big Mossman houses, and all of that came from the mushroom kingdom, the plant kingdom, the microbial kingdom. It all came from this planet that we live on. It's not isolated. They can try and prove it to themselves as much as they want. That, you know, I don't know about that stuff. I know there's not enough research around cordyceps. Oh, right, really? There's enough research around that one isolated constituent that you took out?
Yeah, it's like, is there not enough research, or are you just not up to date with the research and you're not
up to date with the research? And that's what happens. And these ideas, I know they're not fringe for us, but I know they're fringe for a lot of people. And guys, we just want to be, I think I just want to wave the flag of just like, it's not that fringe. Like going through your, you've got a list there. You've said the retinoic acid. You've got your list of things that you like throwing in there as a practitioner, which I like. And I don't cover as much because I just sit more in lifestyle and tonic herbalism. But I used to. I like it. So retinoic acid, wonderful. Vitamin D you've got in there. I remember learning about the association when I was in my early 20s. When I was 17. And I had a friend's mum who had MS, and I learned then that it was a vitamin D deficiency. And I had then my mum, before it was like, this is before she had her aneurysm, at the time had a beauty clinic, and she had an infrared light they'd pop over the face to stimulate collagen and had other settings. And one was a light-based setting to try and, that you'd use during winter time to try and bring forth vitamin D production. And I used to take this big machine and put it in the back of my car and drive it from Putney all the way over to from Piermont to Putney, get it out, put a mum under it for an hour, drive it back, and it would just have the most incredible results on her sleep and on her symptoms. Yes. And at that point, that was just like in my little folky way of approaching. Whenever someone had an autoimmune issue, even before I got into all this and I was a scallywag traveling the world, I'd be like, you need vitamin D. You need sun. Yeah. You need sun, mate. You need to either be supplementing vitamin D, or you need to be getting under a light that's going to help you stimulate it, or you need to be cleaning your skin and going and sunbathing. And that is my absolute number one vote, is for people, if you've got an autoimmune issue, optimize your skin. Do not put chemicals on your skin no matter what. Find an appropriate time, that first light before it gets really gnarly, and in the afternoon as well, especially now as it goes to winter, the middle of the day is okay. Get yourself, if possible, naked if you've got a place to do it, but otherwise that's okay. Just get out in as minimal clothes as possible and bathe and suck up those healing rays. If you can put a bit of coconut oil on. And I will also just remind people that skin brushing is absolutely wonderful for cleaning out. This is what we do in our retreats every single day, right? And I've mentioned a couple of times, it's just like, I swear I'm not trying to spruik it, but like, this is like, I'm having people, this is the time where people come and ask, like late Feb. Anyway, just go and check out Instagram, link in the Instagram, the SuperFeast Instagram, if you want to get info, or go to masonjtaylor.com. Actually, that's probably a better place. Skin brushing every single morning with the bicarb, MSM, bit of vodka in there, and you scrub it, and then you just drive out petrochemicals, and you just wipe off black sludge, and you just, you know what it's like. You just
I just had a flashback to the old Northern Beaches days. I think when you and I, first started knocking around, where I was asking, Mace, where can I get organic vodka? Where can I get organic vodka? I was
like, Vodka O came out just at that time, I remember. And that was good. I mean, like, and then you just like, you got this smooth skin that's like a baby's bottom that's breathing. And then,
absorbing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's working. And then you go and you sunbathe with that. All of a sudden, you're cooking.
Yeah.
Cooking with coconut oil.
I find, just to add to that, with my autoimmunities, I call them, that have that usually, like me, had the stealth infections come first, and they have those grumbling away. When summer rolls around, they are different people, because vitamin D, this is from the research I've done, this is obviously my opinion, but we know that vitamin D levels, when they're optimized, you're going to produce more amounts of a really potent antimicrobial substance that the body makes called cathelicidin, to basically disrupt, viral replication, bacteria. It's a really potent antimicrobial substance. And I see that, every summer, and I experience it too. When vitamin D levels are optimized, you just feel like the load has taken off. The inflammatory load has been removed. And another thing I want to add is, with blood test of vitamin D, the level you see on a blood test doesn't always necessarily reflect, unfortunately, what's inside the cell and what's usable, because these nasty little pathogens have a really good way of at basically getting over our immune army, and that's via dysregulating what's called the VDR, which is the vitamin D receptor. So when they turn down that receptor, and that receptor becomes deaf to the sunlight, it can't absorb it as much, and it can't use it inside the cell and produce as much of that peptide that I'm talking about. So that's what I'm saying by optimizing the sunlight exposure and just getting as much as you can without obviously being silly and getting burnt and that sort of thing, and really optimizing it. You're just really giving your body, optimal amounts of that antimicrobial peptide, in addition to what you might be using, externally to fight, whether it's Epstein-Barr or mold or Lyme or whatever.
Dude, I love it. Hey, let's talk about that a little bit. I know we're going to touch down in the next 20 minutes or so, but I think we've kind of left one of the best things there, here to the end, which is something before I even got into it, I knew I suspected this. I was like, do you want me to believe that this is just some gene that's just turned on, and all of a sudden I have, I had it, but that someone's got autoimmunity? Maybe that's a small percentage of cases that I could buy that, but yeah. I'm like, no way. There's infection. 100%. And
Yeah.
I used to just sit there going like, people are like, can I take these things? If I've got like, an autoimmune issue and, the immune system's hacking itself. And I'm like, well, what do you want? Like immune suppressants? Like, yeah, just some suppressing the immune system a little bit. I'm like, you've probably got a pathogen or something called like, maybe it's not like we can do chicken and the egg. Did it cause it? Is it just, is it just going into the situation that was there and just extrapolating it because it's like all of a sudden open, it's open tether in the thyroid to get in there and wreak havoc. Whichever it is, like there's an infection for sure. If you suppress the immune system, the infection is going to just keep on wreaking more havoc, and then symptoms are going to get worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I was just like, I don't think I can ethically tell people not to take action around regulating their immune system.
Yes.
And building up the core of their immune system. And that's why it's a nice approach. You see, Taoists had it. Yin. Don't put in too much aggression. No, you want to be driving yang into the body, and like a gentle amount. Like Astragalus is a yang herb, and we'd like do we use it? Yeah, but in a yin lifestyle, right?
Yes.
In a yin life, we build up the yin of the kidneys and the jing, and then build driving in with these medicinal mushrooms. Like I had to recommend it. That was an access that I had on top of all the other advice I will continue to point out to you guys. I'm not just saying it's mushies. But I ethically, you have to, because otherwise you just see someone depressing the one thing that's actually going to be able to long-term get them out of the mud when it comes to this autoimmune condition. So I know you're like, let's talk about pathogens being at the heart of autoimmune issues.
Yeah, big time. And like I said earlier, I feel like a lot of things have to line up for the autoimmune predisposition to be sparked and to turn on. And what I really want to stress to listeners, and when I say to a lot of patients as well, is there would be plenty of people that go to their grave in their 80s, 90s that have lived a long, healthy life that have bad genes for autoimmunity. Guaranteed. It's just that their environment and their epigenetic expression didn't act to turn on that bad gene, quote unquote. And, in the folks where it does turn on, like I say, those things have to line up. There has to be the intestinal permeability. There has to be, yes, maybe a genetic predisposition. Usually there is a stealth infection that's like the last piece of the puzzle, as was the case with myself, to really turn it on.
Yeah, or possibly sometimes, like, am I going to go there? Yeah, sometimes a vaccine.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, the heavy metals, aluminium, mercury, lead, we know that these things attach themselves to proteins in the body, and then the immune system attacks them because they're foreign. It's like, hey, that protein looked like that one day. Now it's got a mercury added to its sulfhydryl group. That does not look right. I'll attack that. And that protein might be, on a gland in a body. You know where I'm going? So it's in getting resolution with autoimmunity, you really have to get someone's storyline and look at the timeline at how these things played out. What was the initiating factor? A lot of the time it is the Epstein-Barr virus, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just, they're under super amounts of stress with a crazy job for 5 years, and then boom, lupus or rheumatoid or something like that. So it's a case of really assessing the person in front of you and treating the person in front of you, yes, but it's also good to go through and do the pathology, work out if there is stealth pathogens in the gut, that are cross-reacting via that mimicry we talked about. Look at do a hair mineral assessment, see if they do have a high lead or mercury or aluminium load, and detox that out. Get all the detox organs and all that open to flush it out. And these things don't happen overnight either. Sometimes it's a really gnarly long process, but you have to see it through if you want optimum health, and other times you do get faster results.
Can you talk about mold as you see that as an upstream factor?
I do. I typically see that the people that have been affected by the EBV will also have a mycotoxin load.
Yeah, right.
And again, like you were saying earlier, chicken or the egg, did the mold come first and depress the immune system, and then the EBV was always there but could flourish because of that? Or did the EBV bring the immune system down, and then the person had a crap load of antibiotics, and then the molds and the mycotoxins come over and set up shop? Either way, going in with really good antimicrobial therapies that are ideally sparing to your good bacteria, which is how I how I practice. that's probably the, a good way to get a leg up against these stealth infections, in addition to the immunoregulating agents like the mushrooms.
I might go back through the records and see if I can find that interview I did with Amina Estahilia and put it on this podcast, just so I can really hit that mold conversation with everyone.
Awesome.
I mean, Lyme being associated with being an autoimmunity issue, it always trips me out, or I always forget that it's actually associated with an autoimmunity. Do you see that just in its own little world, or are you kind of feeling like, Lyme's just sitting there dormant as always as a possible contributor, and that Borrelia and all those other co-infections are there at the cause of symptoms that we see as autoimmunity that we didn't actually realize were Lyme?
Really good question. When there is a clean-cut case of a tick bite, such as yourself, for example, and the person recalls it, and it was a gnarly reaction, and then after that they've suddenly developed, neurological symptoms, sore joints, blah, 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 and they're reacting in that autoimmune way, that's probably when I'd be more specific to the botanicals I'm using for targeting Lyme. But that's not to say that the person that comes in with fungus and EBV may not have, Borreliosis or Bartonella or whatever as a co-infection in their blood too. I think it's important to use herbs that are going to give you most bang for your buck in that scenario, where you will, hit on those biofilms and crack open, mold and viral material and Lyme if it's there at the same time, such as cat's claw. Cat's claw is a beautiful herb for doing that. Monolaurin and a fatty acid from coconut oil, beautiful to use. So things like that, as I say, in addition to always working with the stuff that regulates the immune system.
Nice. Yeah. Man, so many more things I can go down. I just wanted to quickly touch back on these receptor sites. I'm sorry, not receptor sites, on these T helper cells. Can you share a little bit further on how they are being regulated by herbs like medicinal mushrooms?
Sure. So certain botanicals have the ability to stimulate different cytokines of the immune system. So cytokines are basically immune messengers that tell the immune system to act in a certain way, to drive up inflammation, to drive it down, etc. The T regulatory arm of the immune system is kind of like the mediator between that seesaw, if you think of it like that, the Th1 and the Th2. So its job is to use let me backtrack a bit. Its job is to basically create homeostasis and what they call oral tolerance in the immune system, to where the immune system knows what's friend and foe, and it knows that that's the thyroid tissue and not to attack that, or it knows that's joints, or it knows that small intestine, don't attack that. But then similarly, it knows when a virus comes along that it needs to, launch a pro-inflammatory response against that. So we find in autoimmunity, there's a loss of tolerance, there's a loss of T regulatory mechanisms, and the immune system has gone awry, basically. It doesn't know what's friend and foe anymore. That's basically it in summary. But yeah, there are different probiotic strains, there's different botanicals, and there's different vitamins that do help stimulate T regulatory processes. Do you want me to go into them? Yeah, sure. So I'm a big fan of vitamin A in its converted form, which is retinoic acid. So for those out there listening, beta-carotene is not the same thing. Don't think you can take beta-carotene to optimize necessarily your vitamin A. Quite often I'll run a vitamin A panel on people with these sort of conditions, and I can confidently say in over 95% of people, basically everyone, they're all deficient. So we have a massive need for retinoic acid, and we do convert it from beta-carotene over to provitamin A, which is retinoic acid, via using zinc. And a lot of people are zinc deficient as well. So the best way I like to get it into people is via cod liver oil, because it does actually contain retinoic acid, vitamin A, in its converted form, as well as vitamin D in the right ratio. And it's important to know that those two fat-soluble vitamins also compete for each other. So if you are taking crap loads of D3, you really want to look at your vitamin A. And likewise, if you're taking lots of vitamin A, you want to check your vitamin D. So those two in concert really work well to stimulate T-reg cells, as does some compounds in green tea, as well as turmeric. The reishi mushrooms, and they're working via stimulating certain cytokines like interleukin-10, for example, or TGF-beta. So it can get really, really nitty gritty and nerdy. I won't zoom in too much, but essentially, yeah, if you do have autoimmunity going on, you do really want to stimulate T regulatory cell function to bring back that balance to the immune system.
And just a quick example, if we're looking at, in one example, autoimmunity, Th1 being elevated, and then another example, Th2 being elevated, and then we see, say, like a suppression of the immune system in that instance. Can you give an example if we're taking a herb like turkey tail or reishi? If we look upstream in terms, is it receptor sites that have been hit that you see that then contribute? Like where would be like 2 steps upstream that you would see what is going on that's then allowing the body to regulate itself?
Yep. So toll-like receptors, as well as the lymphoid tissue within the gut. So all this happens via the gut, which comes back to why treating the gut and healing and sealing the gut in itself has a really immune regulating potential. So to answer your question, yeah, receptors within the gut, if that kind of makes it kind of more understandable, which then immune cells have a very domino effect. So it's the analogy I kind of use is like you've got your innate immune system at the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean, and they're seeing the big ships coming and they're screaming back to the people inland, to the big artillery. So you get that domino effect with the immune communication. In autoimmunity, obviously everyone is just screaming and going nuts, and there's not much orchestra there. But yeah, if I can answer your question simply, from the receptor sites within the gut, which is essentially toll-like receptors and lymphatic tissue.
And so there's like many different receptors. It's why there's an array of a protocol to undergo, but especially looking at why there'd be the possibility of why there is the correlation between fungi polysaccharides and beta glucans, and then looking downstream to T helper cells having the capacity to become regulated. Like it's basically just adding a little bit of upstream command so that you can almost hitting home base so that they can give more efficient orders and processes to those looking over the ocean. So it's not just this, what do I do? Jeez, what do I do?
Yeah.
And can you just give I want to hear a little bit just about the Th17 and its role.
So that class of immune cells is something that came to literature later on after the T1, T2 seesaw balance type of analogy. We started, the researchers started kind of eliciting that and understanding that those class of T helper cells were actually more the ones responsible for the destruction against different tissue. It's Th17 cells that are more prominent and pro-inflammatory, and they usually do act in concert with Th1, but we used to think that it was just Th1 that was causing all the damage. But yeah, the understanding I like to give to people is you really want to think of it as suppressing the inflammatory damage via Th17 cytokines, but you want good levels of Th1 because you know that they're working against the stealth infections. That's where you want to be. That's where you want to be. Yep. So you're a good rocking Th1 arm. The Treg cells are there. They've got the balance across T1 and T2, but the Th17 are minimized.
Okay, so we've basically gone through a lot today. We've covered a lot about autoimmunity, trying to get everyone empowered and understanding whether you're dealing with it yourself, whether you're just curious, whether you're a practitioner, whether someone in your family or friend has it and you just want to understand what's going on a little bit more. I think this is the way going forth. I think, as always, we're looking at the fact that it's I'm so grateful to have practitioners, functional practitioners, allopathic medicine, all of that in my life, and TCM practitioners. I'm also very grateful that this information isn't institutionalized, and to a certain extent it can be disseminated and not owned by the institutions, and it has every right to be in the household. And when it gets acknowledged and be humble when it gets out of your depth, and that's the point where you can go and educate yourself with experts, or you can go and have become a practitioner yourself, or go under the wing of someone that's an expert and knows what they're doing. We've covered, in terms of, from a Taoist approach, nourishing the yin, bringing a yin lifestyle in, Hishu Wu or Jing herbs in order to get that foundations going, and then also building the immune system in the upward upward lifting chi. And so we've talked about astragalus and doing that, but particularly the medicinal mushrooms. Talking about if you're going to use these, start to look at your detox channels. So looking at those 4 elements, make sure you're looking at the sun detoxing through the skin, look at the air and the wind detoxing through your lungs, the water, bladder and the kidneys, and then the earth through the colon. And then on that, ensure that your gut is being nourished. It's an absolute foundational aspect. We'll put the link to our gut podcast that Dan and I did a few weeks back in the show notes, so you can go in and have a look at that. We've had a look from your perspective, Dan, at looking at the diminished adrenal strength and how much of a foundational aspect that is when it comes to any autoimmunity, which is where that correlates, and we see that Western that Western look at that with diminished adrenal strength. Not having enough cortisol to take down inflammation, get up and going in the morning, and also not enough DHEA. And then obviously you're going to see a downstream lowering of sex hormones, testosterone, etc. And you're going to see all shit break loose when that happens. So then we've gone a bit further down. We've gone into the stealth infections, and the fact that we want to look at if modern medicine is looking at suppressing immunity, and even some herbal medicine looking at suppressing immunity, we actually want to evolve beyond that official story. We want to evolve beyond just wanting a straw man or a cause, because that's like, yeah, right, we can argue about the chicken and egg all you want, but let's read into the pattern a little bit more. And one of the patterns we see is that there's often a stealth infection or an infection or a pathogen, either at the root or exacerbating the situation. And so you've talked about the molecular mimicry theory of autoimmunity. It's a good one for everyone to be getting onto. If there is any autoimmunity within your family, you want to be preventative, that's ideal. Even more ideal is that your lifestyle is one of those that doesn't involve chemicals, pesticides, crap being jabbed into you, high heavy metal loads. Start detoxing preventatively. And even if you have, we acknowledge that there are these genes, for lack of a better word, faulty genes that can turn on autoimmunity. And many people do get to the end of their lives without turning them on because their environment was one that had an immune system that was strong and sophisticated, did not contain chemicals. Possibly they got an infrared sauna in their lives and they were detoxing heavy metals through that, or brushing their skin, or drinking spring water. All these things that we see as, let's do these now so that we can be rockin' badass 90, 100, 110-year-olds. Mm-hmm. We spoke a lot about herbs, protocols, and especially medicinal mushrooms and the T helper cell ratio. And the fact that we can't look at herbs anymore in just being stimulants, and even at that point, like even some therapeutics that you were talking about, like retinoic acid, being just therapeutics that drive a marker in one particular direction but can regulate it. And that's what we want to be focusing on. And we talked especially a lot about reishi mushroom, cordyceps, turkey tail. I especially have loved seeing just Mason's mushroom being used because of that poria that I like in there as well, as long as the other big hitters.
Yeah, and one I didn't probably mention earlier was Romania. In addition to Hoshiwu, which as is in the Jing formula, which everyone listening probably knows already. But that is such a beautiful herb in these instances, in the initial phases, I find, to really bring back that yin and moisten the body and get them back into that state where they can start regulating proper amounts of cortisol, getting on top of the inflammation.
Beautiful. God, I love that herb. I absolutely am frothing on that herb more and more, and I'm going to be using it more this year in blends that I've got coming out, actually. Dude, thank you so much. Are there any other notes that you wanted to leave anyone with?
No, it's been fun, man. I've loved it, and I think just leaving everyone with the kind of take home, if you do have an autoimmune condition, to not focus on the label or where it's popping out. For example, if it's rheumatoid arthritis, not to just get sold into, I've got an issue with my joints. Or if it's celiac, don't focus on the fact that it's just with my small intestine. You have an immune system issue. It's an error of your immune system at the end of the day. So it's like we have all these different specialists. You know, we've got rheumatologists, we've got urologists, we've got, you know, gastroenterologists, example. But the issue with autoimmunity at the end of the day is the immune system, and to work at that and to concentrate on that, and, you know, try and apply the things we've been talking about. And that's where you'll get the, you know, that's where you'll get the most results.
Beautiful. Guys, and as well, if you're working with practitioners, I hope you are. I hope you found great people to work with. You can work with Dan as well. I mean, like, I know a lot of people reach out to you after the gut health, and a lot of people didn't know whether they could reach out or not, but you can. And I think you do Skype consultations as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, please do. More than happy to help.
And what I want to say there is, like, you know, have your foot there getting supported, especially if you're not in a position where you can full-time work on your health. If you have, you know, if you might have family commitments and work commitments, etc., life commitments. But remember that you want a foot in that lifestyle world and you want to know what's going on. Please take your sovereignty back. Remember that it is you that is going to do the healing. If the clause of the modern medical system, and I mean, you've allowed yourself to rest completely in the, like, heal me, or if someone in your life is like in that position, heal me. I just do everything I can sensibly to start stepping back more and more over the years into that sovereign space where we do not allow us to just be sent from specialist to specialist to specialist, stay on drugs. We don't know what causes it. We don't know what causes it. Get between the stars, get in the space between the stars, get your lifestyle rocking to support your long-term nurturing. Either put those symptoms at bay so you can have a high quality of life, or if possible, get yourself to a position where you can no longer identify with having autoimmunity. And we believe in you, and please reach out.
Beautiful, man.
See you, bro.
Ciao.